Okay, hi. So yeah, there are three of us here today. I'm Jen, and Harper and Bess are here. I'm a knitwear designer. I'm also a consultant, teacher, and grader. And we are going to talk about slow and intentional design today. And we're so excited to have a guest. So, what's
Yeah.
on everybody's plate? Harper, what's on your mind today?
Well, um, I think I've committed YouTube knitting sacrilege and I don't have a beverage. So I think you have to kick me off right
Yes,
off the
that's
bat. I have to
illegal.
go. I have to leave.
We're
Um,
off to a
but
good start. Yeah.
I do have things on my mind that I can share. One of which being, I have been thinking a lot this week about how pleased I am to see more and more in my online spaces. Um, Seeing more crafters and makers not just focusing on what's new and like the new things on their needles and that they're making and sharing, but also returning to things that they have made. I've seen a lot of retrospectives about like going back and I'm going to look at all of the sweaters I've made in my 4 years of knitting and evaluating not just how your style has changed, not just mistakes, but how the garment itself has worn, like how the construction changed as it wore on the body, and like what you would do differently, what you learned. I think that's very cool. I love that people are not just focused on new, but also thinking about the value of things that we've made. And I
Yeah.
like that a lot.
Yeah, it feels like a
Yeah.
Yeah.
little bit of a recession silver lining, right? Like the
Yeah.
things that we
Mhm.
already have, we're asking to be a little bit more special.
Yeah. I feel like so much of what we're doing as crafters, right, is about appreciating what we have and presence. And I think that being present means like enjoying the thing when it's done, right? Like we love our process to keep knitting, keep creating. But if you're creating and then like just tossing the thing aside, I don't know, there's something that is like a little sad about that to me. I feel like seeing people appreciate what they've done, it is also about like pride and of course it's more sustainable. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's on your mind, Bess? What do you got?
I am finally launching my Bralette test. By the time this episode is out in the world, my Bralette test will also be out there in the world. But if you're seeing this for the first time and you're into it, I do encourage you to go check it out because there are 44 sizes and I will need plenty of people to test them. But I've been working on this for a while and I had some other things that had deadlines that had to get done and I had to set it aside. But it's just like so satisfying when something is finally come together and I can like trust that I've worked out all the math part for now, at least until my tech editor goes through it and I have to work it all out again. But in the meantime, I'm just like feeling so psyched today that I finally almost ready to premiere this design.
This is such a good thing to start this episode with too, because I know that you have had that design kind of in early gestational stages. Try and say that out loud three times. For like 15 months now, right?
At least, I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, when I first started designing, I was like, I really want to design a bralette that is an actual bralette because I've said this, and I really respect and honor all of the work that is out there in terms of the bralette designs that exist. But we have talked about how I'm fairly busty. And if I don't have at least like elastic, I can't really move comfortably through the world. So to me, a lot of the bralettes that exist function more as a top or crop top. And so this bralette, I've wanted to create something that has that encased elastic that would give me the personal like stability that I want from an undergarment. And it's not a structured situation. I don't like a structured bra, I love that bralette space. So
Yeah.
anyway, yes, I didn't know how to do it when I was a newbie designer. So it has been years really that I've sort of thought about like what would that be, and I had to learn how to trust my judgment because there's not a lot of reference. But now it's been at least like 3 months of more actively starting to like put numbers down
Yeah.
and figure them out and tinker with it. It's not been a fast math process, but it is a pretty fast knitting process, which is very satisfying.
That's good because I'm swamped and I'm gonna make one, and that's that. I've invited myself to your test. I'm actually gonna be at your house tomorrow to get a copy of the pattern. I know you're 13 hours away. Because I have to have one. I have to every time I get dressed, I'm like, oh well, if I had my bralette already, I would know what to wear. Um,
I have to
yeah.
say the knitted fabric is a little more supportive than a lot of my bralettes. So when I have tried it on, I've been like, "Oh, this is gonna work." So, yeah.
Well, I can't
I
wait to
guess
brag
I
about
have
that to my
room.
physical therapist.
I
About
think I
all the
have ruined
support
my
I'm getting.
test for you.
And yeah, so we're recording this and I'm preparing my launch for Postscript, which is just a really classic shawl collared cardie. And by the time we air this, it'll be the day before release. So I'm in the slow ramp up now. This is actually
Mhm.
one of the kind of faster, in some ways, designs I've put together because I started work on this project in August and it is now going to be March 9th will be the release date. So that's pretty
Mm,
quick for turnaround, but it worked out that way because it's actually the adult version of a kid's pattern that I did with Brooklyn Tweed. So
awesome.
so yeah, so like you kind of get to lop off that whole like concept, sketch, pitch. You know, you just send the dyer thing of the kid wearing it. And you're like, hey, I'm making this for grown-ups. So you in, right? So
Yeah,
it saves a lot of that time. But you know,
yeah.
we've just wrapped up a 3-month test. I'm in love with everyone else's projects, and I can't wait to share them with you.
I've been
So,
seeing your tester projects come through. They look amazing. And this sweater that you're launching is like a very close to one of my all-time favorite sweaters in the past. So I feel like when you first told me you were going to do this, I thought I'd be able to test knit for you. And then I became a stepmom. So I'm looking forward to adding it to my pattern collection so that I
you're
can
so sweet.
knit it in the future.
There's something really cozy about a shawl collar too that just I'm really big about like having this part warm. So
Mhm.
anytime
Yes.
I can have something that just like naturally like cuddles me,
And I'm also
very
like
comforting.
I'm a sensitive girl right here, and I talk to a lot of knitters who are the itchiest like right here. So to have something where you can kind of get that like open borderline yonic experience right in your sweater is comfortable. So okay, I've got it up. Should I read Blake's letter and then we can start talking with Harper a little more?
Well, wait, first
What?
we have to roll our intro.
Okay.
We're here. It's Knit Fix and Chill. And let's
Yeah.
roll it.
Okay.
Now you can read the letter.
The most official. Okay. So Blake wrote to us, and Blake is a part of Bess and I's community. She has tested for us multiple times. Um, Blake wrote and say, "Hey, can you explain why designers, especially a new designer, might design a pattern that doesn't seem to bring anything new to the table? For example, simple raglan pullover and stockinette when the market seems pretty well saturated with this garment model." We didn't get a ton of questions about slow design, and I think that that's a really good one to have on the table. Usually
Mhm.
what we do is we will read a letter and then we will kind of have a conversation and then we'll circle back at the end to make sure that we clawed our way through it. So what we're thinking that we'll do today, Harper, is just kind of ask you some questions and we'll have a conversation and we'll either stay on track or we won't. But yeah, one thing I know I would love to talk to you a little bit about is you know there's a lot of pressure like you were talking about, especially in these online spaces, which is where we all conduct our businesses, to be constantly releasing new things. Either as knitters releasing, well, not releasing, but showing off new finished objects, or as designers having a new design out in the world, like at a ridiculous frequency. So what do you think is causing that? And like, what do you think the antidote is?
Oh, this is a great question.
You can just
So,
say no.
no.
Pass.
Answer to all the questions, just no. So I think it's a complex question, but you can kind of boil it down to some main points, which are kind of the all important algorithm, and trying to stay visible and relevant, competing with a sales cycle, which affects any consumer market anywhere, and also a really interesting effect of knitting becoming more, I guess, popular or visible in online spaces, which is we have a slow craft imitating fast fashion. Um,
Mm.
and I think, consumer markets have always rewarded like constant visibility and newness, right? Unless you're one of the established designers who, can sort of rest on your laurels a bit, like, the Elizabeth Zimmermans of the world, but obviously we are not all Elizabeth Zimmerman, nor would we want to be. Um, so there's a constant pressure to always be releasing because you have to stay relevant. If you want to make a career of any kind, whether as a knitfluencer who just knits things and is rewarded for knitting, or as a designer who's releasing patterns or a dyer or whatever it is, having something new to show all the time is a huge part of it. You have to be competitive. You have to release new things in order to stay relevant. Um, Plus, it's market saturation. Everyone has the world at their fingertips, right? Especially in the pandemic, people were increasingly taking up hobbies like knitting because we were all stuck at home. Um, so there's really a hunger, I think, for new things all the time because people want that excitement of something new. We've all had that experience of like, ooh, a new pattern, ooh, a new cast on. Um, so especially on social media, everyone's kind of also buying into that like not your grandma's knitting trend. Um, so they're not necessarily as interested in like all the classic shapes and patterns and designs. So there's this kind of like swell of new designers coming out with designs that are not traditional and designs that are imitating particularly fast fashion, like things that you can buy off the rack. And fast fashion is built on newness all the time. Um, so I think that's kind of those are the elements I think that are really pushing it. I hate boiling it down to, well, it's the internet, but it kind of the heart of it, I think, really is like it's the internet. It's the internet. We all need something new all the time. Um, I don't know if there's really an antidote to that, unless we're talking like completely overturning like capitalist consumer culture, which might be a little too big for this conversation.
So do
So
you feel that pressure as a designer to, because you put out really thoughtful, like really kind of slow release, really unique, distinct designs. You're not pushing out, here's another classic basic, here's another classic basic, right? So do you feel that pressure too?
um, I do and I don't. I think I should like couch anything I say in an acknowledgement of I am very, very privileged in that I do not do knit design for a living. This is not my main income. I have a very stable job that has nothing to do with knitting. And I do knit design mostly for my own gratification. My knit design practice is very rooted back in like being a teenager who grew up in a rural town who had no access to any fashion anywhere, especially not the fashion I was interested in. And so I didn't know how to sew. I couldn't get to stores I wanted to, but I could knit. So I tried to knit the things that I wanted to see. So my knit design is always rooted in like knitting what I want. And it's not really for profit. It's not really to stay relevant. It's really cool that people like what I do. And there is a little bit of that. Like, I've had some really successful patterns, and it always comes with that feeling of like, ooh, I have to make something else that's gonna be just as exciting or as popular. And I really try to be conscious of that and temper that with no, no, you don't. But I do feel it. I do feel it, and I actively combat it. And I also get the privilege of not having to submit to that pressure,
Yeah.
basically.
I wonder if in some ways, like recognizing pressure and taking that time to be like, resist this and, you know, your pursuit of what you're really passionate about, I feel like that must contribute to the fact that your patterns are really well liked and appreciated, because it's something that you really, your heart is clearly in it. You take a lot of time and put out designs that have a lot of intention, like even across Instagram, I can see.
Yeah, I do think that that's true for a lot of designers. I would say that's also true for you and for Jen and for numerous other designers I know. But we all approach it kind of differently, and it all comes out in different ways. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
So what about Blake's question, right? Like, so what about should we stop releasing basics? Like, do we have enough of them? Do we have enough raglans, guys? Can we stop? Please don't say yes because I'm releasing one in like April. But should we?
I was gonna say
Never.
never, never stop releasing raglans.
if I can jump in again,
Mhm.
I would say uh, absolutely not. We should not stop releasing basics. I think the uniqueness of a pattern is not only in the design itself, but it's in the delivery. And I think especially as the market is moving more towards like greater size and shape inclusion, this is especially important to not stop releasing the basics, because I think collectively we're constantly learning more about how to achieve better fits, how to modify patterns better, how to build better size charts to start with that we can grade from, that all of those previous iterations of the basic raglans, basic drop shoulder, whatever, that they weren't necessarily bad patterns, but we know more than we did when those patterns were released. Or we can communicate it better than
Mhm.
those patterns maybe were. And I think there is so much value in continuing to release the same kind of shapes and sizes, but with improvements, and also for different audiences is another big thing.
Yeah, I think it's also a really good experience for a designer to go through that and to build their library with some basics. It gives I feel like it gives knitters like almost a benchmark experience, right? So
Hmm.
they have some idea of what it's like to knit a
Yeah.
basic raglan. They can watch and see how this designer approaches the experience of giving them a pattern, marketing this pattern, pricing this pattern. They can have an experience that's analogous to something else while that designer kind of gets their feet wet and learns how they want to show up in the marketplace. So I think that's one of the reasons we see a lot of that too, is people just feel like they need to get some experience before they go bigger.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah, cool. So,
All
talk
right.
about overthrowing capitalism for us, would you? How are you going to do it?
Yeah.
You're out here hustling patterns. Tell us how you're going to overthrow capitalism.
Right. I think people always bring up uh, that I call myself an anti-capitalist, and I would like to amend that. I would like to say I'm always careful to say I am an aspiring anti-capitalist, because it really is. It's not making excuses. It just really is an aspiration, and I think anybody who is invested in finding a better way for society and economy and culture to function than our current landscape, um, it is an aspiration. We don't live in an anti-capitalist society. We do live under the pressures of markets and capitalism and economy and consumerism. Um, and I don't know, no one person can do it. And this is a bigger conversation, and I'm going to try really hard not to get lost in the sauce, like going into all the intricacies. To speak to myself only, I am surviving as best I can in an in a capitalist society and economy, and doing my best to uphold ideals of anti-capitalism, which is really community care. That to me is the antithesis of capitalism, is community care and creating community-based practices and ethics and
Mm.
values, and to combat hyper-individualism, which is also a tenet of capitalism. Um, I have people challenge me saying, "Oh, if you don't like capitalism, why do you charge money for your patterns?" And that's a really complicated question that I'm going to again try to touch on briefly, which is I don't design for money. If it was just me, for sure, I would release things for free, but I also believe in equity. And knitting as an
Yeah.
industry is not an equitable place. It is chronically undervalued. I think that knitting designs are undervalued. I think that I think test knitters are undervalued. I think yarn dyers are undervalued. The problem is if we were always if we were to compensate everybody fairly all the time, everything would be massively expensive, and that's why money doesn't work. Um, but I think that people should be fairly compensated for their expertise, their time, and their effort and their materials.
Yeah.
In creative spaces, especially, it's all so deeply undervalued. So I charge money for my patterns because I want to release things that I believe are the standard that I feel these products should be. I release patterns that I think uphold the values and the practices and the standards that I think all knitting patterns ideally should have. And I believe that those things should be valued fairly, not because necessarily I want to earn a lot of money with knit design, but because I want the people who are making a real go of this, who are designing full time, like yourselves, to be compensated fairly. I want to see that.
Yeah. That's really familiar. When I first started releasing patterns, I was working full time as a CPA, right? So I was in a situation very much like yours. And I was like, no, I'm gonna price just higher than the average because I have the privilege to be able to do that. And now I'm on the opposite side. And, I think that people really do a disservice when they underprice their garments. And I think that that's a much bigger conversation too,
Mhm.
because it gets into, one of the things that I would change if I could wave a magic wand is I would say that the people who have that first mover advantage, who are massively underpricing their patterns, are doing a lot of damage to the industry. And I don't think they would experience an income drop if they raised their prices. But what they would do is they would share some of the available market share with other designers, which would be good because we'd see more diversity in what was getting knit, and we would see more diversity in whose work was getting celebrated.
Yeah, and who gets to do the work at all, right? So like it
Mhm.
occurs to me that in making sure that you're charging the market value at least, if not, like I do also charge a little bit on the higher end for a garment pattern, but I believe that garment patterns are underpriced, so I charge a little bit more in order to push that envelope forward, in order to drive the price slightly up, slightly, so that folks can enter into the space. That like not everyone has the privilege to be able to work at a loss for years in order to get into the space the way that most designers have to, right? Or not necessarily a loss, but perhaps it takes you a year to recoup your initial investment on some of your first garment patterns, right? So that means we're excluding like who can even afford to try. So I think it's important to recognize how, like you said, Harper, that equity has to come hand in hand with our ideals for moving past a capitalist driven society.
Yeah. And I would add to that also, I mean, it's very good and well for us to talk from the perspective of people doing the designing. Yes, we want to get, be fairly compensated, value for labor, and yet, but I think also hand in hand that goes with accessibility, because knitting should, I mean, the phrase that everyone repeats is knitting should be for everyone, and it should be. And so part of that also is, okay, I made the choice. I am going to price my patterns at what I think is probably still undervalued for how much work some of them take, but at a higher price point. Like my one garment, the base pattern price is $15, but I also built in financial accessibility into the pricing, which is I have pay what you can codes that
Mhm.
give you sort of tiered up to a 50% discount on the price. Um, because I do believe also accessibility is so important. And I think if you want to build a business that values community over consumerism and over capitalism, that is still sustainable, building in those tools for accessibility is also important, and keeping your community forward and first of mind is part of that, and it balances out. I find that most people choose to pay the full price for the pattern. A lot of people also opt for one of those three discount codes, um, and that's fine. I encourage people to do it regardless of financial accessibility, whether they can or can't afford, like, it doesn't matter. pick the price that feels best to you. And I think that just moves it forward for me personally to a more, what feels like a more kind of like equitable and fair and balanced field.
I like that. It's like a price
Do
sharing.
you, yeah, do you feel like that puts pressure on designers who aren't yet making minimum wage to offer the same sliding scale?
Um, it's a difficult question, right?
It is a difficult question.
It might. It genuinely might. And I really wish we existed in a place where people could just do what they felt was right for them
Yeah.
without worrying about what anybody else was doing. And that's kind of my approach. I always try to say, like, I do this. I try to be very transparent. Like, I can put the pay what you can pricing. I can
Yeah.
charge half price for my patterns and give that code because again, it's not my main income. And I try really hard not to sound pretentious or full of myself or like self-congratulatory about this.
I feel
I
like
think
naming
people
that
need to
privilege
make,
does leave that room. It leaves space for somebody who is not yet
yeah,
breaking even and who is working at a loss, but
exactly.
still wants
I think
to.
it's very easy in these conversations to say, well, I do this because I care about this ideal, and then
Yes.
that makes people feel bad that they can't do the same. And that's not what it's about. That's again not aligning with that goal of creating a space where people are able to function and achieve what they want to achieve and be fairly compensated and to feel fairly compensated for their
Yeah.
time and valued. It comes down to value and not in a monetary sense.
Yeah. I've seen this. I don't know. I feel like we're right on the edge of getting to really like juicy controversies, but I've seen this come up. Yeah, I'm sure we'll hear about it on the internet later. Um,
I don't read those
that's the internet for
forums.
you. Um, but I think that there's a big dialogue too about how much yarn should cost for sweaters, right? Because if you walk into a fast fashion store, that garment costs the same, um, regardless of what size you buy. And if you buy hand dyed yarn, that is not the experience you will get. If you buy any kind of materials cost for a different size garment of a different size. So I think that there's a lot of pressure in some parts of the size inclusive community to price share.
Mm.
I have had people in the very smallest sizes show up in my DMs and be like, why am I being asked to pay for 8 skeins of yarn when I need 3? Um, and, I mean, I think there are multiple ways to look at it. I think that's one that it's a really fair perspective to point out that that there's a disparity in what it costs to clothe a larger body. I do also think that there's value in saying, hey, like a lot of us knit for pleasure and we all can knit the same number of skeins per year. That might work out to fewer or more projects depending on what kinds of projects you choose. But, you know, I,
Yeah.
but it's a big, messy, nuanced conversation. And I think that there's a lot of figuring out that we're still doing. There's a lot of sticky spots. There's a lot of judgment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the danger of these, con- quickly, the danger of these conversations is coming across as my way is the best way and therefore the only way, and your way is lesser. And that is, to me, never, that's not a good conversation. That's not a good community. Um, I wish there was more space in these conversations to allow for people to grow, allow for us to all to make mistakes and say the wrong thing, and then realize maybe you said the wrong thing. Um,
But then
we're
also,
all
when you
learning.
remove fear about talking about topics like this, you make more space to surface additional
Yeah.
solutions.
Yeah,
I agree.
absolutely.
And I think what the real, like, if you peel back this conversation, as well as the conversation about why it's important to recognize, right? Like both of these points, why is it important to recognize and offer a system for a larger body to be able to knit a garment at a fair price for them? And also, why is it also fair that someone who only needs 3 skeins for a project might not want to buy 8 skeins? And I think acceptance and grace are at the heart of both of these issues, all of these like topics that we're bringing up in this conversation. So it's not just like I do this and so everyone must do this, but it's more of what do you do to address these things that you see, and for a consumer, for a knitter who wants to prioritize their own values, I encourage and I will encourage everyone to have the conversation. And if you're not sure that a designer or an indie dyer or whoever that you're considering purchasing from aligns with your values, it's okay to also ask, hey, how do you handle this? Why have you made that choice? I think the more willing we are to have those
Mhm.
conversations with potential clients, potential knitters who want to knit my pattern, or a potential person who wants to buy yarn, if I were a yarn dyer, right, is to actually be willing to say, this is why. And, I'm confident that someone who would ask me what my values are, that I would be able to explain what my values are. And I would be comfortable for someone to be like, those aren't my values, to not buy from me. And that's okay. I would encourage someone to ask me if they don't know where I stand. Um, but I think it's
Mhm.
dangerous to be like, if someone cares about this issue, this is how they will handle it, rather than ask them how they are approaching
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I have two last thoughts on that. One is, um, I think there's the pitfall of um, so many online spaces. Again, we're talking about online spaces.
Hmm.
Is losing sight of a common goal. We get very caught in the minutiae of
Yeah.
bu- what's the best way to do things, and we lose sight of everyone is trying to achieve. If you're all within the space of, we want to make things more equitable for fat bodies, we want to make things more equitable for designers, the end goal is the same. How we get there, we might have disagreements about what the best way is, and there are some objectively wrong ways to do it that are not kind and are not good for anybody.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like, everyone has a different way and a different approach, and it is okay for someone to have a different approach from you. The end goal is the same, and the way consumer markets work, people will go to the people who align with them,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which goes back to what you were saying, Bess, about people will see in and they will see what they agree with and what resonates with them, and they will go to that. And the approaches do not all have to be the same. We do not have to get stuck in these conflicts
Yeah.
in which we're fighting about the thing we agree on, and that is how the community fails. That is how we break ourselves apart. And the second point is, the beauty of small business is we get to do that. You get to see the person, not the corporation. um, I've always been very transparent about the things I believe and who I am and what my ethics are. And definitely, a lot of people don't agree with me on a lot of my politics, and they'll say, like, why do you bring politics into it? And part of that to me is, again, is what you said, Bess, is I want you to know who I am, because I don't want you to support me financially if you don't support who I am as a person, because they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Again, comes with privilege. I can say that because I'm not relying on this business. It doesn't matter to me if someone chooses not to buy my stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah,
But even like,
Yeah. The only other thing I would
go ahead, Jen.
oh, go ahead, Bess.
I was gonna say, I do want my knitting design to be financially profitable for me. I want my financial, gain to grow as I continue to do this, as I like continue to grow as a designer, etc. And at the same time, I would be willing to say that, like, as a queer person, I am okay with someone who like doesn't support queer rights, not by like, I still don't want that money. Like, if this ends up burning me somehow, I would be okay with that, because I still will say that, like, my work is for people who accept my identity. My work is for people um, who aren't going to like actively discriminate against me. You don't have to be queer, but if you hate queer people, you probably don't want to support me, and I probably don't want to like answer your emails if you have a question. Like, it's just that's just that, right?
Yeah, let's just not. Yeah.
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 All right.
Yeah, I was gonna add that we aren't all always going to care. We we're not all going to have the same priorities, right? Like, one of us might platform financial accessibility top, and then take our cues from other leaders in the industry who are doing size inclusion justice, right? Like, we can care about a lot of things. It doesn't mean that we can all be the number one rock star in every single thing.
Yeah.
And I do think that there's room for, a designer to care about financial accessibility, but not do something like a sliding scale, but they're making a big investment in another part of the market, right? So I think that there's all
Yeah,
sorts of ways to show up.
absolutely.
Yeah.
My way is not the best way.
We don't know that yet. It's a social experiment. We're going to find out. All right.
Yeah. I like the way you show
Oh,
up,
that felt loaded,
Harper.
but good. I really enjoyed talking about that because I feel like we don't get to have a lot of out loud conversations about things like this
No.
that are nuanced and gray and squishy. So thanks
Yeah,
for
and
having that
listen, this
conversation.
is a podcast for knitters who want to go deeper, and we're going deep today. But kind of bringing it back to slow knitting, right? I think that when you remove some of the pressure to go quickly, that it allows you the space to consider all of these other things and offer something that will align more with your values. So I would say, Harper, what other pros, like what other benefits and experiences do you have, or even drawbacks, right, from designing at a slower pace? Like Usagi, did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay. Like Usagi was just released and you had a long test period for that. And like I'm interested to hear what that was like for you.
Right. I think the biggest benefit to slow design for me in a slower process is it gives me space to always push myself. Um, I have the advantage because I take things a little bit slower and I'm not really thinking about, oh, I need to have a spring collection or a summer collection or a fall collection. I just kind of go with my whim, which again is like a privilege to be able to do. I get to always challenge myself, and I feel like I am constantly becoming not just a better designer, but also a better knitter and also a better just creative person in general because I'm not thinking so much like, oh, I need to release a pattern next month. What's something I can maybe leverage from a previous pattern, or like I'm going to use the same shape and just put a different stitch pattern or like color work motif on it. I get to think really deeply. I like the process of thinking really deeply about what's something I haven't tried before. What's a design idea that is kind of technically challenging? Like, how am I going to figure out how to make this work? With Usagi, I had this vision of this sheer panel across the chest and shoulders. For people who haven't seen it, it's a bottom up sweater with a drop shoulder design. It's got a little bit of lace and it's got the main focal point is this sheer panel of mohair or suri alpaca that is a V shape and it stretches across the chest and shoulders. Um, and I had this idea of that and I was like, how do I make it work? Um, the answer is quite easily. It's not a super complicated technique, but figuring out all the details, figuring out how to make it work across and be consistent across lots of different sizes, making it work with the lace and texture patterns that I had built in, figuring out how I'm going to make sure it kind of sits the right way on all the different sizes, how to make the neck hole. Like all of those things were kind of learning experiences for me that I got to have those conversations with my tech editor, um, and made me a it was a really good learning process for me. The sweater design I did right before that, the kindness of ravens, is another bottom
Mm,
up sweater, but it was a totally different sleeve construction. It was a set in shoulder with short row sleeve caps, and it featured this really wide color work motif around the bottom of the torso, and figuring out how to uh, make that work across lots of different sizes and sort of fit like an all over cable pattern in with a color work motif. Um, Figuring out those little details were technical challenges that I had never thought about before. And I really like that. To me, it's all about kind of like my own creative growth and challenging myself to think outside the box. It's how I keep my brain from stagnating.
Yeah.
That's a huge advantage.
I think that there's a couple different approaches we can take to design, right? For somebody who enjoys spending a little bit of time intensely on something quickly and then moving on to the next one, they're going to find a much more satisfying experience designing more things that are less complex. Whereas, I think you and I, and Bess too, like we really love spending a long time on something, and kind of really finessing those details. And maybe it's more complex knitters might, than every knitter might find accessible for their skill set. But it's just there's a lot of different serving different parts of the market there, and also scratching different parts of the brain's itchiness, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. There's
Yeah, I
something
was going
really
to chime
beautiful.
in.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I was going to chime in that I feel like I fall into both of those categories sometimes, and there is a certain satisfaction in both ways of designing, both ways of knitting and creating. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. To me, like I find I balance it by like accessory designs are my like quick fix. Like, ooh, I just have an idea and I'm gonna do it, and this is really
Yeah.
super fast and like instant gratification. And then I've only done 3 garment designs so far, but those were where I really like was able to take the time to really like sit with it and get lost in all those details. And I think um again, as you said, Jen, it's like it's serving different markets. There are people who really want like your basics and who enjoy using the same motifs across a wide range of
Yeah.
different items. And there's absolutely a space for that, and there's absolutely a demand for that.
Mhm.
And then there are also people who enjoy really investing in like a single piece and really giving that all it's worth. Um, depends on your preference.
Yeah. No wrong way to do
Mm.
it. No wrong way to be a designer in that way. Um,
Hmm.
I hear from knitters sometimes that there can be a sense of frustration when their favorite designer releases more things than they can keep up with, right? So I've heard knitters be like, "Oh yeah, but she releases a pattern like every month," like as if that's some kind of rushed process, right? When if somebody's working full time, that's not actually a hard thing to do,
Yeah,
particularly if they
Yeah.
don't
absolutely.
need to market it a lot, because we all know that marketing is what takes up most of the time. Um, but I feel like there's a relationship where with what we talked about in the beginning, right? Like feeling that pressure to be a fast knitter influences the way that some of that work is received, and that's not really fair to the designer. I don't if your customers are happy with what you're knitting, then there's not really a wrong way. There's not a wrong release frequency. There's not such a thing as being too fast
Mhm.
or too slow.
Yeah.
How about cons? Are there any downsides to the way you do things, to your speed, your frequency, and your process?
I mean, obviously there's the whole thing about market relevance and visibility, and taking more time does mean that you're not always going to be like on the front pages of everybody's feeds. And for me, as I've said, like that's not a big deal for me. There was a time when I was seriously considering doing knitting design more full time, and that was something I thought about a lot. And I think it shows in some of the designs that I released in that time. Like I can look back on the catalog of things I've designed and gone, right, that was when I was really trying to like release more things more quickly.
Mm.
Which is not to say I'm not proud of those designs. It's just I can see the traces
It's a
in
different
myself of like
flavor. Hmm.
this is where my brain was. Um,
Right.
so there is that con. And coming up with like things to try and like produce content in between like these really long pattern releases can sometimes be challenging. Um, and that's okay. That's a different part of my brain I get to stretch. Um, yeah, I don't know. To me, there's not a huge number of cons. I think the biggest one for anyone considering knit design and considering doing a slower kind of approach to things, staying relevant, finding ways to stay relevant and engaged, would be a challenge. I think it does though link back to what we were saying about like if you take more time and you're sort of investing more time in more unique or niche designs, it kind of pays you back because you are carving out an area of knit design that maybe fewer people are operating in. Like my designs are kind of gothy alternative patterns for the most part, or
Yeah, and like Kindness of
D&D
Ravens, like somebody
inspired.
has to like both colorwork and cable knitting
Exactly. So
and following complex
Mm-hmm.
shaping. Yeah.
right. So if you search for like raven or crow inspired patterns, I tend to come up because I have patterns that have those keywords and those motifs, and there aren't a whole lot of other ones. Um, so you kind of get to have your own little niche where there is maybe you're producing fewer patterns, but there's also less competition.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it
Yeah.
balances out a little bit, I feel.
Yeah. I feel like basic raglan for a new designer is the hardest place to be in. You know, I think that once you have an audience, it's a little easier to say, hey, you've gotten to know me. Here's, you know, how I do things. I've thought of this with you in mind. Here's this basic.
Hmm.
Whereas if you're a brand new designer, like, yes, it's definitely a good experience to go through designing one, releasing one, going through all of that. But it's the hardest, I think, is to sell in a very saturated corner without a lot of brand recognition.
Yeah. I do think one way to combat that as well is by making your own design releases slower, it gives you more time to do other things, such as engage more with your community. So,
Yeah.
something I get to do because I release patterns more slowly, I do test knits for other designers a lot. And I
Yeah.
think that's a hugely valuable um, experience for me as a designer because seeing how other people work and seeing how other people design and knitting from other people's designs, I think is part of the homework of being a good designer. You get so many ideas from knitting other people's patterns, from watching how other people work. And it also like it comes back and rewards you because if you do a test and odds are then you're engaging with that designer's community as well. And so
Yeah.
that's bringing more people in. It's more chances for you to interact with other knitters who are probably then attracted to the same like style and aesthetics as you are. So it kind of like feeds back in on itself. It comes back to my little, ethereal idea about community and
Yeah.
all
No,
those
I'm with
things. So
you.
it's all very holistic to me.
It's all the same. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. I love that. I firmly believe that, like, so we're having this conversation around slow knitting or slow design, right? But that doesn't mean infrequent. Like, you are clearly consistent in your engagement with your community, in knitting as a practice and a passion, in design as a passion. Just because you are going through the steps at a pace that makes sense and supports you as a whole person doesn't mean that you're not doing those things, right? So, like, I wanted to chime in to say, like, the concept of doing something in a, like, a quote unquote slow way, when we talk about like slow knitting, the slow knitting practice for a hobbyist is to try and remove that layer of pressure and to truly enjoy the pace at which you're working, to work consistently, whether that means every day or it's 3 days a week or it's 6 hours, or, you know, when I was a young lady, I would knit for like 7 days straight without doing anything else because I could, but I have less time for it now than I did then, even though it's more of my work now. But yeah, I think it's not the idea of not caring or not being in the process. It's the
Mhm.
idea of leaving for yourself, like you said, a holistic space where you get to be Harper, the whole person who isn't only here to function around knitting.
Hey.
I promise I have another function. I swear.
No, I'm joking. You know, I've been doing more sewing recently, and now that knitting is a job, I do often find myself needing to knit on deadline, right? And that's not the same as a hobby.
Mhm.
It's not a hobby anymore, right? So now like I can sew and I've been working on the same garment for oh god, so like I embroidered the back panel of a top I'm going to make like in the summer, and then I went to sew it together after getting my sewing machine serviced. And it's not even the right size. I like embroidered the whole back yoke of this thing. And I was like, well, I guess I gotta throw that away.
Oh
But because it's
no.
not a sample. I didn't. I just tucked the edges over. Now it's going to be an applique panel on the back yoke of the thing that's actually my size.
That's what I was just
But
gonna
yeah, I
say.
mean, I
Can't you
worked on
just
it for
make
a
it an
couple days.
applique?
I did. I did. I didn't think it was going to work because of the shape, but it did. But yeah, like now I find it much easier to show up in my sewing. Like before, when I did both as a hobby, I would feel a lot of like hustle, like pressure to produce. But like now there's not really anybody even to show it to. Like nobody cares what I sew. Like that's so liberating. Like it is just for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to bring that energy.
Mhm.
I love that.
All right, y'all. Do we run out of things to say? Has that ever happened to any of us before? I don't think so.
For me, rarely. I find it very hard to shut myself up sometimes, so I'm trying to like.
Okay, well, you don't have to. What else would you want to leave readers, readers of the podcast?
People who are
Readers of this audio visual experience.
yeah, those of
Yes,
you
those
reading
readers.
us with your earballs.
Hey, we
Who
got
could
the
be reading a
captions. They could be
transcript?
reading. What you do a lot of test knitting. You do a lot of things for pleasure. How would you suggest that people get off that knitting culture hustle wheel and back into having their fingers touch yarn?
Put your phone down. um, that's not a hot take. That is one of the most basic pieces of advice you can give to anybody is just unplug a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but in seriousness, I think the idea of sort of like slowing down and taking more time and really investing and kind of like reinvesting yourself in the process is something anybody can do, whether you're a designer or a knitter or a sewist or whatever your craft is. I think it's very easy to get caught up in like that constant, everyone releasing everything all the time and everyone having yarn and just, you get lost and it's hard to resist that hustle culture of like, okay, what's the next thing and the next thing? And it taking a step back and really thinking deeply and pre-planning. In school, I always hated having to do the rough work, and now I love it. It's my favorite part. I love
Yes.
sitting and just like sketching ideas or if I'm looking at like thinking about a new knit design, I look at my closet and I go, okay, what's the gap I need to fill? I don't
Mhm.
need another cardigan, even though it breaks my heart because I love cardigans. I don't need another one. So what do I need? If I'm going to make something, how does this actually fit into my clothing rotation and what need will this address? And then also, I mean, it's great to impulse buy a pattern, but taking time to really assess and think about, is this pattern going to serve the need that I've identified? Is it just pretty or is it actually going to work for me? Are the schematics going to work for me? So
Mhm.
taking time and slowing down and thinking really deeply about your projects, thinking about what is the function of this thing and not just the art of it. Um, and I also would say if anyone's interested in like applying slow design practices, put the pattern down and just try designing something for
Design.
yourself. It doesn't have to be a fully graded, 28-inch to 65-inch chest deal, but designing something just for you, I think.
Mhm.
If I could recommend something to any knitter ever, is like knit your own thing without a pattern, knit your own sweater,
Yes, I love
figure it
that.
out. Don't be
Mhm.
afraid to rip back and do it. Like that's how I started designing knitwear, was not designing patterns, but it was just designing for myself. And I wouldn't know how to design a sweater pattern if I had not just in high school, like knit a bunch of really badly fitting sweaters and then figured out why they fit badly and then I did it differently the next time. Um, yeah.
I love that. And it's a little bit like type 1 and type 2 fun, right? Like I'm not here to hate on the excitement of a fresh cast on. I mean, if people just want to get like the high from a fresh cast on and then frog it and do it again next week, by all means.
Mhm.
That if that's I'm not going to shoot on that, right? Like you do you.
No, it's great.
But like there is also something to relish in the type 2 fun of planning out a bunch of mods before you cast on and I had somebody make 13 swatches on a test one. She's like, I do this all the time. Like, talk about loving the rough work. I was like, I feel so
Yeah.
bad. She's like, oh, no, this is just how I do it. I was like, okay, good.
Okay.
I'm
I
glad
love
you
the
didn't do
rough
that
work.
just for me.
I wouldn't do 13 swatches. I don't know.
I was just thinking, like, she
I'm in
must get
awe.
like at least a whole extra skein or two for that.
I don't know. Could ask her. But yeah, I have somebody in my audience who just designed their first sweater for themselves this week, and um, she did a beautiful job with it. It's gorgeous, and like I can feel her joy all the way from Seattle to Pittsburgh, right? Like
Oh,
you can't take away having done that for yourself. Yeah, I think you're right that if knitters want to get in on that, get in on it. Yeah, I love that.
I think people would also be shocked to find out how not difficult it is
Yeah,
to
don't tell
just
them that part, right?
I don't.
Shh,
Yeah,
I
it's
didn't
not
say
difficult to
it.
design just for
You just do
yourself.
the thing. Yeah,
I'm gonna correct that. It is difficult. It can be very difficult to grade a pattern, but to just
Yeah.
cast on and knit something for
yeah,
your own body, that's the part I meant was like not complicated.
yeah,
That part is shockingly straightforward if you know how knitting and your body works.
yeah, yeah. And it's a good idea to play, right? It kind of puts the play back in the experience.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Sweet. Okay,
Yeah, I
y'all.
think going slow is about keeping the joy in something in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah. Let's take it into wrap up.
Yeah, let's do
I
it.
loved this conversation. This was
Yeah.
so fun. Okay, so Harper, where can knitters find your patterns?
Um, I'm a professional and I don't have my own domain. You can find my patterns on payhip.com/disyarningdesigns,
Perfect. Yeah,
Wonderful.
that's
or you
fine.
can find me on Instagram at
Yeah,
disyarning.
cool. All right. Bess, do we know what next week's topic is?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. Y'all,
I
this
think
has
we talked
never
about it. We
happened
didn't plan it.
before.
Oh, yeah, we're doing question and answer. We have a whole bunch of questions that people have
Oh,
sent for
that's
us
right.
to answer.
That's
Yeah, it's going
really
to be fun. We've
exciting,
got a grab
actually.
bag,
Mm-hmm.
fit grab bag. It's going to be really fun. And
Mm-hmm.
that'll just be the two of us. And we'll do that in 2 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, and for those of you who have made it all the way here, thank you for listening to our first guest episode ever. I hope that Jen and I are good at having guests, but we're super grateful to have you here, Harper, and I really
Thank
encourage
you.
everyone to check out their work. It's wonderful. I've been a fan since before I was a friend.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It was a delight to actually sit down and chat nerdy knitting things.
Seriously. Okay. Well, thanks for everyone for watching. And thank you, Harper.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Happy knitting, y'all.
Yeah. Happy knitting, y'all.
Happy knitting.